Ever watched a coworker try to scan a 50-page stack of documents like an X-ray machine? Or see someone microwave wet paperwork to dry it out and set the whole office smelling like burnt popcorn? Today we're collecting the most gloriously brain-dead workplace moments the internet has ever witnessed, including a 40-year-old man who threw his phone in the microwave to hatch Pokemon eggs, and an accountant who single-handedly understated his company's business needs by 12 times. For 6 months straight. Subscribe if you've ever looked at a coworker and genuinely questioned how they dress themselves in the morning. Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for the support. Saw a guy lose an arm because he decided that day that he was going to stick it to the man and wear long sleeves in the shop whether they liked it or not. He was on the machine next to me with a ratty hoodie on and whoop, no arm. We got to shut down for the day. Freaking idiot. Next story. One 50-year-old coworker was asked to send a photo by converting it to a PDF to a manager. She printed out the photo, scanned it into her computer, emailed it to herself, downloaded, converted it to PDF, emailed it back to herself, saved it on her computer, then sent the email. I sat there and watched in horror. She wouldn't accept help. She said her method was faster. I lost brain cells that day. Next story. Knew his job was being made redundant with a specific date, stopped caring too early, and got fired. Time theft. 2 weeks before being eligible for redundancy, was going to be a $60K payout plus unused annual leave. Next story. I once saw a coworker pour boiling hot water from a kettle onto our absolutely climate-controlled indoor office plants. When I asked her what she was doing, she explained she figured it was winter, so she figured they might be cold. Next story. A coworker was supposed to scan a stack of documents. The feeder was jamming up, so he decided to place the entire 50-odd page stack onto the scanner glass, closed the feeder lid over it all, and hit scan. He somehow believed that all the information would be captured like an X-ray. Next story. One of the #1 rules in a restaurant is to never use a glass to scoop ice out of the ice machine. I saw one of our servers doing this and told her not to do it. I saw her do it again and explained that beyond chipping the glass and leaving a small shard in there, she could break the whole glass, hurt herself, etc. She rolled her eyes and walked away. 2 weeks later, we're cleaning up after long, hectic Saturday night. It's 3 a.m. and we're finally almost out of the bar, when all of a sudden I hear a piercing shriek from the kitchen. The server runs out of the kitchen holding her hand that is absolutely blood everywhere. Someone rushes her to the hospital while I go into the kitchen. Sure enough, the ice machine and kitchen floor is absolutely covered in blood, and there's a broken glass in the well. Our owner just told us to call a professional cleaning team, sent everyone home, and came in at 4 to wait for them to arrive. Wouldn't you know? That server tried to sue the owner for workplace negligence. She put this poor small business owner through a year of courtrooms and negotiations, and they ended up settling once he had enough of it all. Apparently, she still doesn't have full use of her hand, and to this day, accuses this bar owner for ruining her art career. Next story. The boss asked the new admin assistant, AA, to order some sandwiches from Jimmy John's while he worked through a lunch meeting. This was one of the job duties. The AA disappeared for 3 hours before coming back and threw the sandwiches on his desk an hour after the meeting had ended. The boss gently asked her what had happened, and she started screaming and cursing at the boss that it was his fault because he had given her an impossible job and she couldn't find a Jimmy John's in 2 hours of driving around. Jimmy John's had delivered to our office many times before that. She got fired for screaming and cursing at the boss, and of course, not being too smart. I was the boss. She kept screaming the whole time she cleaned out her desk. Next story. At my first job, some guy decided to fart into the intercom mic. He was like, "Hey, y'all want to see something cool?" And he just bends down to the mic and farts in it. Next story. Dumbest plus most inconsiderate. She microwaved her spaghetti and meat sauce without a lid. Tomato sauce with beef all over the inside. She just left it for the next person to clean up. I was furious and went after her, ready to rumble. Our boss, the kindest, most patient person ever, quietly separated us, then went in and cleaned it all up herself. I felt guilty for creating a scene. Coworker brought cold lunches from that day on. Next story. 2 guys in the accounting group went on a work trip to help with an internal audit project. They tried to submit receipts for a men's club on their expense report. They both got fired. Next story. When I was a grad student, a fellow lab worker moved a nearly full column of radioactive material in a graduated cylinder from the fume hood to his desk with no precautions. He managed to spill some on the floor. In a panic, he proceeded to walk through it and track it all over the lab. A fellow student screamed at him to take his shoes off, which he did. He left them in the damn hallway outside the lab, exposing everyone walking past. Even better, he started walking through the mess in his socks. The decontamination team appeared and tore all of us new assholes as they laid down protective sheeting on the floor. In the group meeting with the department head, the student blamed everyone except himself for the mess. He didn't face any consequences. We all had to repeat our safety training. Yeah, I switched career paths away from research really quickly. Next story. We used to deliver rental mobility scooters to cruise ships. One of my coworkers was just a bad employee. He tried to transport all the scooters by daisy-chaining them together with the charging cable and driving the front scooter, hauling the other scooters like a train. It didn't work. I have a huge list of the stuff he did. He also set off bomb-sniffing dogs by using ammonia-based cleanser after the cruise ship security people told him not to, and he tried arguing with customs officers at the cruise ship terminal, which got our equipment quarantined. Next story. A coworker didn't want to look for the two-handled cheese knife for cutting 40-pound blocks into smaller chunks. He grabbed a 14-feet chef's knife and just put a towel on the tip for protection. He slipped and hit his wrist, severing a few tendons and arteries. I turned to ask him to bring me something to the line and saw the blood hit the ceiling. We had to close the kitchen. We bundled him up and got him to the hospital. Surgery and a long rehab later, he was fine. Next story. We used to have big, 1,000-plus page technical manuals in a cupboard in the office. They were stored in large lever arch folders. One of the ring binders wouldn't lock in place, so while some new folders were on order, someone put a note on its spine saying, "Does not lock, be very careful." A few days later, I heard a scream and a flump. A new graduate had ignored the note and somehow dropped the manual, and the pages flew everywhere. She had to spend the rest of the day reorganizing every single page. Next story. My immediate supervisor spent multiple weeks using his workday making a really shitty website for his over 30-plus basketball team, a team that he managed because he couldn't play any longer. He interrupted me multiple times a day, asking me questions on how to fix his web design. I helped him because he was my supervisor. Then he got fired a month later. In the end, everyone in my department got canned except me. But he could have easily been retained if he actually did work instead of just passing everything off to me. Next story. I'm a dog trainer. One of my coworkers had to be fired because she wouldn't stop kissing the stranger's dogs on the face the first time she met the dog. No matter how many times we tried to explain to her she was going to get bit, she wouldn't stop. She was fired because she was a blatant liability. Next story. Unchained an excavator in a dump trailer, couldn't get it started. He is not an operator and had no business doing anything of this. So he used the dump trailer to literally dump the excavator out of the back of the trailer along with 2 yards of concrete debris. Year-old excavator flipped over and on its side, along with the debris on top, bent the frame of the truck from the fifth wheel ball. This all happened as I was pulling in. He rode with me back to the shop and I fired him and cut his last check. In total, his decisions cost me $163K in damages in less than a minute. Next story. Accept a check from a customer for $1,200. Our policy was to take an ID like a DL on personal checks. This was 15 years ago. She wrote down the number of a gift card, prepaid MasterCard as ID. Yes, bad move. Next story. Oh, there are categories in different job settings. 1. Safety. Tried to push start a forklift with another forklift by himself. He was going to jump off that one and onto the other before it passed. Instead, it ran into our giant $13,000 bay door and messed up the railing. Same guy also lost the tailgate of a damn trailer on the highway by forgetting to lift it before taking off. 2. Cost. At a refrigerator manufacturing plant, a guy used the wrong part early in the process, in a position that gets covered up pretty soon down the line. No one caught it the whole day because QC was busy with something else and didn't check. 7 figures worth of product had to be redone. 3. Hygiene. This one makes me angry just thinking about it. I was working in a very substances-friendly kitchen, and a guy working sauté seriously started loading his bowl of crystal meth right over the cooktop. I was so upset and drunk that my first thought was that I wanted to bash him with the hot skillet he was potentially sprinkling meth into. I don't think I've ever yelled louder in the workplace. Next story. I used to work in editorial. Edit people always thought salespeople were dummies, and salespeople always thought editorial people were assholes. One morning I walked into the kitchen to make coffee, and one of the saleswomen was trying to get her toast out of the toaster with a knife. I slapped the knife out of her hand and unplugged the toaster. Next story. Back in 2005, I worked in a research and development lab. The technicians in the lab had their own workstations with a computer. I noticed one computer monitor had parallel lines drawn on the screen with a pen. When I asked about this, I was told the lines were used to make sure the Excel spreadsheets always had the same spacing for the columns. Next story. Smooth a yearly forecast by summing 12 months of forecasts, then dividing it so it was even by month. Not the best tactic, but here's the actual stupid thing he did. He for some reason took a single month and divided that by 12, understating business needs 12-fold, and in turn, didn't place POS because we weren't at MOQs. Again, because he understated business needs damn 12-fold. This went on for like 6+ months, because simultaneously, he had convinced the COO that our DRP wasn't fit for purpose. It was fine, meaning everything was being done on spreadsheets. They were so obsessed with getting Prop Hit implemented, like it was a panacea to any alleged problems with supply chain and procurement, that they couldn't see the forest for the trees and turned off the DRP before we had anything new to use. And in the end, they got knocked back because of the price anyway. His human error saw A-line stock plummet in branches by over half, never get replenished, and eventually, when his mistake was realized, by accident, by a comm who wanted to audit his process, the cash flow couldn't accommodate the sheer amount of POS that would need to be placed. The only way the business could come close to getting that cash was to make 20% of their staff redundant, including support staff, data, like myself. From what I hear now, it's a damn mess, because customer relationship management is at an all-time low, no stock, and nobody has the skill set required to give any business or data intelligence anymore because they got rid of us. The biggest slap in the face was that we all complained about him and brought up the stock issues to the COO multiple times, backed up with data, but the COO put his head in the sand because he was too proud to acknowledge that his golden boy was a damn moron. Both of them got to keep their jobs though, because A, the guy who made the mistake obviously needed to rectify it, and B, because the COO is C-suite, so he is part of deciding who gets made redundant. Anyway, as amusing as some of the answers here are, this example shows that a stupid coworker can have repercussions, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it because they're a protected species. If you happen to have a coworker that's stupid, but not in an entertaining way, and you can't figure out why they're still there, yet for some inexplicable reason they are, then take that as a red flag and look for opportunities elsewhere. Stupidity does nothing but cost businesses money. And then sometimes, when those costs get too high, the business will claw back money by making you pay the price for someone else being a jerk. Next story. Worked on a job on platforms and huge diesel trucks in a loud environment. The truck moves at random and often, sometimes a good amount of space. Anyways, this guy just went underneath the truck, while the guy on the other side was instructing the driver to move. Next story. I was a new manager who inherited a bad employee. I started down the path of performance management, and he basically refused to come back to work until I was removed from my position. Wrote a letter to the VP demanding they report to someone competent. The company fired him with cause. The kicker was we were going through a reorganization, and I later learned my new boss was planning to punt him with a $75K severance package. This was in 2009, so not a bad chunk of change. Next story. 40-year-old man ran to the break room microwave to throw his phone in because he thought it would give him extra steps on Pokemon Go to hatch eggs in the game. Next story. 42-year-old who works in food industry for 4 years has the manager ask for a sandwich. Okay, what can go wrong? Guy puts it in a plastic container to heat up in the toaster. She says, okay, just heat me up some meat. This guy puts the meat on parchment paper and burns the entire toaster. Next story. A guy they brought a couple of weeks for extra work spent 2 days eating Doritos in the same spot the whole 8 hours. The funniest thing is that he could have hide and stay there getting paid, but the moron did it in the only spot there is with a security camera. Still took them 2 days to fire him. Yeah, this factory is a mess. Next story. Used to work in a secondary school as a student support officer. We quite regularly search students for lighters, vapes, phones they claim not to have, etc. The number one rule was you had to always seek senior leadership approval prior to conducting the search and confirmation of the search ending with any prohibited items. Rule number 2 is you don't conduct the search alone and need at least one other staff witness. A colleague, 20 years my senior, requested my presence for a search for a lighter. I radioed to confirm. Without waiting for a reply, he begins the search. We both got suspended for 3 months pending investigation. Nobody got sacked, but it definitely hurt my reputation just by being involved. I left teaching the following year and have never been happier at work. Next story, worked in tech support. Coworker, who had been on the job 4 months by then, plus 6 months on the same job but different project, was assigned on chats. HR had 2. He just kept sending messages in about him looking into it, and please wait a while longer. He then messaged me privately for help. Told him one of them needs to be sent to email and handled there, and where to find the solution for the other one. After an hour I was covering his 10-minute break. He had done nothing by then. I did the research, added notes for him on what to do once he's back. He came back from break. I was then assigned to help out any coworkers who need assistance. He made a post in the help thread directed at me, asking if I can take over his chats because B doesn't know what to do. I blocked him on Teams after that with permission from our team lead and reported him to the higher-ups. He then complained I was bullying him because I did not reply to his request for help. I shared the screenshots of the private messages and his chats, and he got fired. Next story. When the company announced layoffs, I know a guy who quit saying, "I know they're going to get rid of me." I said, "Don't you want to wait and see what the settlement they're offering is?" And he said, "Nope, I quit." They gave everyone laid off 5 months paid leave and 2 weeks salary for every year they had been at the company. He was there for 12 years. Next story. Stole from the company. I knew, he never got caught. Started with borrowing a few bucks out the register, graduated into stealing tools/equipment that could be easily sold, along with altered sales tickets. His luckiest break is the people that owned it was dumber than him. Next story. I work at a very large company, 100,000 plus employees. Someone once sent an annoying email to the whole company. Tons of people responded using reply all to tell them to quit sending them emails. That was the first wave. The second wave was lots of other people using reply all to tell everyone to quit using reply all. All in all, it was quite hilarious, though it did knock out our email system for a day or two. Next story. Not a coworker, but I was talking to a person I know, and he said he doesn't do 401k. I was like, "What? Do you have investments for your retirement?" He said no. I'm not close with him at all, so I left it at that. One day I saw his Facebook post with some money returned from the government with the caption, "You get this if you came here legally and pay taxes." Unfollowed him immediately. Ironically, I'm pretty sure he married his husband for the green card. Still legal, I guess. Next story. When I handled ergonomics for an office, I learned to sneak up on people who requested consults to see how they really worked. This one guy was reporting back, shoulder, neck, and wrist issues. I come up on him 5 minutes before his appointment and find him stretched out across his desk. His keyboard and monitor are shoved to the far side, and he's there with his neck craned up to see his monitor, his arm outstretched to reach the mouse. As soon as he sees me, he straightens out and pretends that he works like a human, but I'd taken pics. Dude was in real pain. Why would you do that to yourself? Next story. I used to work for Waymo back in the old days when they had a contract with Avis. We had a private section of their lot to park the self-driving Pacific as, and the whole area was covered with cameras. We also had a fueling contract where we'd refuel at the end of the day using a keypad that was kept in a locked box. For some reason, one of my coworkers decided he wanted to get some free gas for his personal car on Waymo's dime. He waited until everyone was gone. He was actually the one assigned to lock everything up and fueled up his own car. Since Waymo has everything on lockdown, they caught him almost immediately. When you gassed up, you had to input the vehicle number, and the system flagged it because a car popped up twice for fuel, while the logs showed the car was actually shut down. They checked the cameras, saw him fueling his personal car, and fired him on the spot. I have a bonus story too. When I first started, some guy tried using the laptop to switch the status from production to brake while the car was still driving. It's not even possible to do that because the car has to be disengaged to change anything. But the number one thing they stressed was to never touch the electronics while the vehicle is in motion, especially in self-driving mode. He tried to save a little time, but ended up jeopardizing everyone's jobs. This was only a few months after that Uber self-driving car killed someone, so Waymo wasn't taking any chances. He was gone. And to add some context, it's extremely hard to get fired there, but touching electronics while in motion got people fired on the spot. Next story. For the last month of my grocery store job, I worked as a janitor. One day in the men's bathroom, the pipes that were used as the waste pipes and connected the main toilet and urinal had some bad issue. When you tried flushing either toilet, a lot of piss water would leak out of the pipes. If you tried flushing the main toilet, which was heavily clogged, not only would brown water leak out of the pipe, but the water would also rise up and spill in the stall. The other janitor was working with me that night. When we discovered the problems with the toilets and decided we needed some plumbers to fix this crazy issue, the guy for some reason continued to flush the clogged toilet several times. Pretty quickly, the whole bathroom was flooded with poopy water. Next story. Worked at a tech company in a brand new building on the 11th floor with cameras everywhere in a kitchen. Two of my coworkers just took a dolly in the walk-in and loaded it with like 5 big boxes of beer bottles and walked them to the freight elevator and stole them in front of like 15 cameras. Next story. Quit a year before she could retire and get her health and dental insurance and some life insurance paid for. She worked another full-time job just to pay for that insurance after she quit a job she had for 24 years. Couldn't hang in there one more year. Next story. I worked for a theme park as a teen in the early 80s. One evening after work, I was at a nice restaurant with some coworkers, and we saw a couple of the arcade techs from the park across the restaurant. They were ordering everything on the menu, including steak and lobster and champagne. Then we saw them hoist a canvas bag of quarters onto the table. While they were arguing with the waitress, I ran to the payphone in the lobby and called our supervisor who was still at the park. They started an audit on the arcade machines and called the police department. Meanwhile, one of my coworkers advised the restaurant manager what was going on and to count the quarters at the table, but very slowly. They got arrested for stealing thousands of dollars in quarters and thinking no one would notice. Next story. My boss spilled their drink all over a case file and then put the stack of papers in the microwave to dry them because that's what you do with wet paper. I get into the office and ask why it smells like burnt popcorn. A microwave hole burned through the stack of papers. I laughed so hard right in their face, asking where they left their brain, after a coworker told me what happened. Boss was offended I laughed at them. Did not like that. Next story. Hard to choose between cracking a beer at a 10 a.m. meeting or falling asleep at their desk on the first day at a client's office. Both were topped by the manager who fired the client, leading to him and 10 other people being laid off. This all happened within about 6 months at the same company. Next story. Genuine story from my current corporate job. It's just misreading the room/power dynamics than dumb. I'm a middle-aged middle manager in a standard crap corporate type job. A new person was hired, junior analyst type role, and he seemed really confident and outgoing. Great stuff. A few days after he joined, we had one of the quarterly, "Hello, headcount" town hall where our CEO pretends to care about us lesser humans. It was winter here in the United Kingdom, so she was joining the meeting from her Mediterranean villa. Hey ho. Anyway, CEO did the standard insincere crap of, "Any feedback or questions? My door is always open." New hire, for reasons I will never understand, asked the CEO in an open forum. "Yeah, I've got a few questions. Can I put a meeting in your diary to discuss?" CEO froze. She'd never actually had to interact with the lesser humans before and didn't know what to say. "Okay," she stammered. New analyst lasted 2 weeks. He was quietly sacked during his probationary period as a poor cultural fit. Everyone else quietly took on board the CEO's real message of, "My door is always open to real humans. Very rich people or powerful people. Everyone else, the subhumans, use the tradesman's entrance round the back and don't get the carpets dirty." Next story. I once worked with a burnout at a sandwich shop chain. This genius decided instead of mopping the floor at the end of the night, he'd take a whole mop bucket of soapy water and just dump it behind the counter, leaving maybe a millimeter of water on the floor. He forgets he does this, and while walking behind the counter holding a whole bucket full of sliced tomatoes, slips and falls and dumps the whole bucket of tomatoes on himself and the wet floor. I wish I felt bad for him in that moment, but he was so high he probably felt no pain. Next story. Worked at a prison. Did drug and alcohol rehab therapy groups. In no way were my team and I any sort of security. Our offices were converted cells in the cell blocks, and I never felt unsafe whatsoever. Anyway, my supervisor was out in the day room waiting for all the clients, inmates, to come out for morning meeting. He decides to go into the cell of 2 individuals to make sure they're coming. Attendance was mandatory, and getting them to come was pulling teeth. We were absolutely not allowed to do this, as it's a massive security and safety issue. Not only for us, but the clients could very easily use that against him and say he did something weird. We were not armed with anything, and he very easily could have been locked in there by them with no protection. Next story. A woman I work with saw an ad on Facebook for something to do with crypto mining, her words, that said you could make huge gains with a minimum investment of $4,000. The post was liked by someone she knew, so she assumed they were vouching for it. She sent $4K to the account listed in the ad, lost it all, and they are not responding to her emails. Wow, much surprise. I had heard about people losing money in dumb ways, but had never seen it up close like this. This woman has a college degree and is in a decent-paying white-collar job. Next story. Just had the company kitchen remodeled, nicer than it should be for a work kitchen. First day, the cleaning guy scrubbed the brand-new stainless sink with one of those sponges with the dark green Scotch-Brite pads, basically scratching it all. Boss was pissed. He also washed the shop manager's vintage Thunderbird with paper towels and a bottle of Windex while the boss was out of town and the car was parked at the office. Next story. To get our truck onto a pedestrian path, we had to remove a bollard. My coworker used his bare hands and grabbed the bollard from the base to lift it. I asked him if he considered that dogs pee on it, and he looked at me in horror. I've removed that bollard before, and it 100% smells like dog pee. Not sure how it didn't cross his mind. Next story. Maybe 20 years ago, a coworker got into a tiff with the boss about who was pulling his weight versus who wasn't in our department. Hint, he wasn't. The last thing he did that day was polish up his resume and run off 100 copies of it. Only problem, he left the original on the glass in the machine. Of course, the boss found it first thing the next morning. Next story. I was doing auto glass for Safelite, and we had these little white sponge-like things. Probably about the same as a Mr. Clean magic eraser. I think we were supposed to use them on the pinch weld, where the adhesive goes, and then the windshield goes on the adhesive, and maybe also on the glass, but I forget. This was back in like 2014, 2017. They were very minorly abrasive. I was out on a job with I think 2 other guys, though I forget why. I may have brought them the windshield they needed or something, and I think one of them got something on the side of the car. It could have been some primer or a dab of the adhesive. I just forget. The main point of the story is that this dumb jerk told me had a trick for fixing things like that. And I was like, what do you mean? He proceeded to take one of the abrasive sponges, vigorously rubbing it on the spot where they got the primer or adhesive or whatever. I was like, no, dude. But it was too late. He'd rubbed off some of the clear coat and was getting into the paint. I told him he'd better tell the client what had happened, and he did, which was nice. Absurdly, the client's response amounted to, oh, well, it's her car. I don't drive it. I hadn't realized the guy was a trash until that moment. Next story. He got his check immediately from management on payday and left in the middle of his shift to go cash it at a Walmart center about half a mile away. This was a busy Italian kitchen. He was a dishwasher. Things piled up quickly, and no one had noticed he was gone because he left his phone to play music from the speaker. We got slammed from lunch to dinner. When he got back, he apologized for getting lost. Some real Charlie Gordon crap. But let it be known this dude was a legitimate crackhead. The line cook had to be held back from smashing his face in. Next story. The deputy head teacher stood up to announce a change in policy. He started saying that evidence shows that if students take fewer GCSEs, they will achieve higher results in them. The head of science interrupted saying, "Can we see the evidence?" The deputy head sighed and started again. In my opinion, if students take fewer GCSEs... Next story. Current place? DoorDash every day, sometimes twice. His bank actually called him to tell him he spent $3K on Dashers 2 months in a row. Previous job? Got one of those 2 a.m. infomercial knives with a naked lady painted on the blade. Decided to use it instead of our safety razor knife things they give us. He's maybe 12 feet up on a ladder cutting zip ties to free up some power cords, and suddenly a good quantity of blood is falling to the floor. Sliced his hand wide open with his naked lady knife. He made it down safely and had to pay his own medical fees because multiple supervisors told him to put the knife in his car and not bring it back in. Another job or two back, the grocery store. Dude asked me to stand guard while he huffed every can of whipped cream we had. Dude was a slacker nobody liked. So I helped him put them in the dumpster and then told the boss where to find them and to use my making eye contact with the security camera as a timestamp. Next story. I drive city buses, and maybe a year after I started, the station agent called me to the window and in a very uncharacteristically serious tone, gave me a time and location to take over a route and to inform the brand new operator that he was to see his manager when he got back. As it happens, the newbie had taken one of the newfangled electric buses, despite not being trained on them, and ignoring warning signs to that effect. He didn't know how to charge it on his layover and just kept driving it until it completely ran out of juice and died in the middle of a major road. As he was still in his probationary period, he was fired for this. But I still remember the last thing he said to me. "You don't think I'm in trouble, do you?" I did in fact believe he was in a world of trouble, but didn't have the heart to say it. Next story. This is fresh in my mind, but I work in a jail kitchen. The other day they called for an inmate worker to go do a bio cleanup. Someone rubbed crap all over the walls of their cell, and every single refused. So I told them I will pick someone, and if that person refuses, then they're fired. They said I'm full of crap and can't punish them for refusing. My kitchen partner sided with them and started talking about how she's going to refuse to send anyone. Control could hear the whole conversation, and the sergeant came to tell her they're looking at firing the entire kitchen staff, including her. Next story. Run out in front of a tractor carrying a big load of logs down a hill and wave her arms yelling, "Stop!" And after the tractor slammed on the brakes, she walked over to a log, took a leaf off it, then stepped back to let the tractor go ahead. I wish I was kidding. Next story. Ex-coworker let her ex-boyfriend stay with her when he got out of prison. Within 6 weeks, he had violated probation, stolen her car, abandoned the car on a busy highway, fleeing from police, given her chlamydia, and left her pregnant. We all told her to ignore him and let him go to a halfway house or his mother's. Next story. A really nice, but a bit vulnerable young bloke I used to work with in a supermarket was in a long-distance relationship with a crazy woman who wasn't treating him really well. She convinced him it'd be really hot if he filmed himself in one of the walk-in fridges all over the products. The crazy woman then sent the video to the store managers and everyone he worked with via social media, trying to get him fired, so he had to move 4,000 miles to live with her. Thankfully, the store manager was actually a decent bloke and got the guy some help, made him break up with the woman, and informed her local police what she'd done. He kept his job, but it was a close-run thing, and he had to argue with HR and stick his neck on the line to keep the guy on. Next story. Several stories about the same jerk. Working on a customer service desk, I sat next to said jerk. One day, I overheard part of his phone conversation in which he called the other person honey. Not unheard of in the Deep South and mid-80s, but then he got quiet. No talking and no typing. After a minute or so, he continued with the business of the call. Less than a minute later, he says honey again. About 5 minutes later, he was called to a closed-door meeting by our boss's boss. The jerk was talking to a female sales rep of our company. Months later, the jerk had been told he would be terminated on a particular date. He was moved to a department that was not customer-facing, and he was allowed to conduct his job search while still in our employ. While using the shredder one day, the jerk got his tie entangled. The paper shredder pulled his neck close to the machine, and he could not find, or maybe could not reach the button to switch off the machine. A coworker in the room at the time laughed at him before releasing him. Early in the week before his termination date, he was careful to tell people what he would like at his farewell party. No one had planned to do anything in the way of a farewell. Next story. My HR manager fell for a phishing scam and sent all our W-2s to a random stranger. W-2s contain social security numbers and home addresses, so identity theft gold basically. When I said I'd freeze my credit as a precaution, she told me not to because I wouldn't be allowed to use my credit cards. That's not how that works. And anyway, I was past taking any advice from her. Next story. It was me. I wasn't totally clear from the industrial paper cutter when I engaged the brake that holds the paper before the hurt blade comes down. I was able to snatch my hand away before I did too much damage, but I degloved about half a fingernail and had to go to urgent care to get it wrapped up, even though it didn't bleed that much. More embarrassing than anything, but it didn't feel very nice. Another cute one was when I was working at an accounting office during tax time. Our sweet intern was overwhelmed and had let his coffee get cold. I caught him putting his metal tumbler into the microwave. He about cried because he couldn't figure out how to heat it up after that. Poor kid was fried. I helped him problem solve and told him to either dump it out and make a fresh pot or pour it into a disposable cup to heat it and then dump it back in his mug. We were friends after that, since he was grateful that I didn't bust his chops for it. He eventually got hired as an associate. Next story. Quit because we said he wouldn't. I don't remember the jokes leading up to it, but I remember saying, "You won't walk in there and quit right now." Guy had been there for a couple years. Good worker, regular lunch buddy. Dude was, whatever, I do what I want. Walked in and quit and went home. I remember hearing someone say, "That's the coolest thing that dude's ever done in his life." Next story. Worked at a tire shop. We had a cage for death rings, an antiquated version of semi-truck wheel rim. Guy stuck his hand in the cage to jiggle the air chuck, and surprise, the rim shot off and broke his hand. It's wild what happens when you do the one thing you're not supposed to do. Next story. Had a coworker attend all of the Dave Ramsey financial class crap. They ranted and raved on how they feel so much more financially secured, only to admit in the next breath that they cashed in their 401k and bought a massive motorhome so they can enjoy traveling the US in the next few years. Next story. I was taking a job because a girl was being promoted. Good for her. About a month later, she was pissed off, and I asked what was up. Turns out after moving over to a salaried position, her take-home pay dropped by about 15 to 20% per hour due to more hours with not that much more pay. Next story. I once worked with someone, dude in his 30s, who didn't know his left from his right. Also had to correct him on multiple occasions that 6.5 was not in fact 6.1. It was a car dealership and you had to send out how much oil to pump into a car for the tech. I've also had older coworkers just show me adult film on their phones with zero regard for their surroundings and without me in any way wanting them to do so. Car dealerships really have some characters. Next story. Saw a coworker use a deli meat slicer without the cutting guard. Everybody warned him not do it, but he was so overzealous as to not produce food waste. He would use his hand to push as much of the meat as he could past the blade, and he eventually hurt his hand. He never came back. Next story. I'm an engineer for road construction. I had a colleague go on a field visit and park the company car in a median and run across the interstate. After finishing at the site, she ran back across the interstate to find the car had been towed, because you're really not supposed to park in a median. Next story. It was one of the installers. He was goofing around in the warehouse on a pallet jack and riding it around like a scooter. Well, he put a corner of he racks when going around a turn and dented the crap out of it and busted the jack handle up as well. Dumbass. Then decided to push the now broken pallet jack under the rack he just dented and went off to have a smoke. I saw him do it all along with my manager on my first day of training, and she chewed him out and then called his manager over to do the same. Next story. Eat half a brownie with substances during their lunch break. She barely drank and had never tried substances before. We were tellers, working in a financial institution. It did not agree with her worldview, or HR's. Next story. Had a coworker who came out of a porta-can with a blue hand. Turns out he had dropped his phone in there and went searching for it. He was removed from the site for drug testing, and I never saw him again. Next story. I watched a coworker calculate subtract comps from sales using a calculator. Problem was, he has 0 in comps, so he was using a calculator to deduct nothing from something. Next story. Not a coworker. I believed the company when I trained the person to do my job that it was just as a backup, not a replacement. That person also was dumb and believed the company when they said she would just be doing managing and not having to pass meds and other floor work. She complained about it to me once, and I didn't express a lot of sympathy. Next story. Used to work in a hospital as a medical assistant. Cleaning crew left a box of Mr. Clean magic erasers in our unit. One of my fellow Ma's took one of them and said, "This works great for bleaching your teeth," and scrubbed her teeth with it right in front of me completely unashamedly. Next story. I worked for Starbucks for a long time, and oh boy, have I had some doozies. Back in the mid-2000s, I was working in a store in Orlando, Florida. We had this new person, and she was very sweet, but boy, some of the things she would do. We had a counter that wrapped around the bar area and the dish area. The dishes were all out front. A 3-compartment sink where we'd set a tray full of dirty dishes to be washed. Next to the sink was the Hobart dishwasher. It was pretty busy, and dishes were piling up. In the sink. In the dish sink. Next to the dish machine The caps are because this detail is key to the story. So one of us asked her to do some dishes, then we all turned back to deal with the insane customer situation. After a while, someone said, "Hey, where is she?" I went looking for her. When I found her, I discovered she had taken the loaded dish tray from the dish sink next to the dish machine and gone all the way back to the back of house, behind the office. That's where the mop sink was. A 6-inch tall sink on the floor with a floor cleaner dispenser, a mop bucket, and dirty mops and brooms hanging over it where you dump filthy mop water. She was sitting on the floor, attempting to wash the dishes with the floor cleaner dispenser in the mop sink, on the floor, far away from the dish sink where she had taken the dishes from. Working at Starbucks can suck, and it's a hard job, and it takes a while to learn everything, and some people are definitely more suited to it than others, but I've never seen anything like that, before or since. That was like 20 years ago, and I still can't believe it. Next story. I worked at an Asian restaurant that has one of those altars for good luck. We used every available surface to do work but the altar, since it was a small location. We've all seen the nightly ritual of my boss bowing and praying to it in closing and opening. One morning, I had a new coworker sit on the edge of it, feet dangling on Snapchat doing dog faces. I usually am cordial if I physically touch a coworker, but I instantly yanked her like a toddler from a high chair before the owners came by. Next story. It was in 2016 when I worked as a security guard for NPI Security in the Wells Fargo Skyview building in downtown Des Moines. One of my fellow security guards unscrewed the ventilation shaft cover in the stairwell of the 8th floor and crawled to the vent above the women's restroom so he could spy on them. My conscience eventually kicked in, and I had to report him to my supervisor. What's your wildest "coworkers aren't your friends" story or lesson learned? Was feeling down as my mother was being treated for cancer. Confided only in one woman I thought I was friends with in work, as I don't like to discuss my private life with work colleagues, as people have used personal information I've shared against me in the past. She proceeded to tell everyone without consulting me, as she felt it should be something my manager should know about. She is no longer my friend, and I don't tell anyone in work anything about my private life. Once bitten and all that? Next story. I had moved to Texas for personal reasons and accepted a director position at a nonprofit. I owned a home in my home state and was renting it out while in Texas. After a year, for multiple reasons, I made the decision to move back to my home state and back into my home once the tenant's lease was up. I mentioned it to a colleague, I thought in confidence, since we were friends. I wasn't going to give my notice until a month before I would be moving, as a month's notice was required by HR. But this colleague went and blabbed about it to my boss, and so instead of me coming to her with my resignation, she came to me and said, "Is it true that you're leaving Texas?" And this was a full 2 months before I planned to move back. It worked out fine, but it was such a betrayal. Since then, I never tell anyone I work with anything private. People are jerks. Next story. I worked in a small department of a large company with 6 employees. I did machine rebuilding and installation and traveled about 30% of the time. 2 of the guys and I got together outside work for parties, etc., with our families on a regular basis. The company was going through changes, and my travel ramped way up going to sites to troubleshoot problems. I told my wife it was like they were trying to get me to quit. After about 3 months of this, they let me go with a nice severance package, and I had another job in 2 weeks. So a few months later, I found out one of my friends had been in a meeting where management discussed putting a lot of pressure on me to get me to quit. So much for work, friends. Next story. Worked at a company for 8 years. Considered some of those people great friends. I was laid off. Guess how many people called to check on me? Guess how many of them I'm still friends with? The answer to all of the above is 0. Damn them. Very eye-opening. Your coworkers are not your friends. Next story. Not me, but my ex. I worked a corporate job for 10 years, so I kept telling him that coworkers aren't friends. He gets a new job where it turns out everyone there was very not into queer-related topics. And he starts telling them about a bunch of queer activities he wants to engage in like they're all buddies. Within 2 weeks, he's suspended for HR issues. By 3, he's fired for harassment. I wanted to put a huge, "I told you so," stamp dead center on his forehead. Next story. Went to a Super Bowl party at supervisor's house. Boring game. Fell asleep during 3rd quarter. He posted a picture of me asleep with a beer in my hand during the morning team briefing. Next story. I was quitting my job and going through a lot otherwise, severe mental health issues, etc., and I got into an elevator with one of my slightly more senior coworkers and said something sarcastic. I honestly can't remember what it was, but in most contexts could have been taken as a joke, and my coworker immediately, unbeknownst to me, rode the elevator back up and screamed at my boss, "What did you do to her?" The entire company heard. There were a lot of issues with the company and how it was being run. I can't remember exactly what I said, but I remember my ex-boss scheduled a one-on-one with me the next day to assess if I had any problems with the company. They really didn't want me to leave. I said I didn't have a comment, and then he quoted back to me exactly what I said to her. Kind of ruined my last couple days at my job, and when I tried to have a talk with her about the impact it had on me, she made up some crazy line of reasoning about how protective she was over me. I never made that mistake again. I've had many instances in which my boss mistook me as being their friend, which always went sideways for them when I decided to move to a new position. We were never friends. They just used me as an emotional dumping place that made me more than happy to leave once I got the chance, including the above work environment. Next story. My coworker/self-titled work wife used to text me all hours of day or night talking trash about other coworkers/managers. I texted her one morning extremely frustrated with another of the managers, and the next day the GM pulled me in the office to talk about inappropriate texting, and if someone is off, they are off, and to leave them alone. Don't talk about other employees, blah blah blah. What the heck? Next story. My husband is an actor, and he worked at a restaurant with a bunch of his friends early in his career. They didn't approve any of his time off if they knew that he needed it for acting, like they just wanted him trapped at the restaurant because they were. He would follow all the necessary protocol to make sure his shift was covered every time he needed time off, yet they still tried to hold some power over him. Now they aren't coworkers or friends. Next story. Moved to a new city. Didn't really know anyone other than my coworkers. There was one coworker who I considered a friend. We hung out outside of work, smoked, drank, BBQs. He got fired for having over 20 attendance violations. He told everybody I got him fired. Like, bro, you were my favorite coworker. I'd never. All my other coworkers knew it was crap. The clock had been ticking. But damn, it set me straight. Coworkers aren't your friends. Sure, they might become that, but being friendly is not friendship. Next story. Worked for a severely understaffed newspaper 20+ years ago as a graphic designer/page layout director. I made a comment to a new coworker that if I had the chance, I would open my own newspaper, but it would take a lot to do it. She asked me questions about what it would take. Would I have done it then? Absolutely not. She goes to the editor and publisher, owner, and said that I threatened to open my own paper. So yeah, she tried to get me fired or in trouble. The publisher tried to fire me, but I explained that it was only a QA conversation and that there was no way I could even start a newspaper. She kept me, but then I quit a week later. There was so much toxicity in that office. Next story. I got fired because my coworker went on a work trip with me, and after our third night at the bar, I told her I was more of a smoker and not a drinker. She immediately told the director, and they fired me. My other coworker turned over our personal text messages to deny me unemployment. Damn both of those assholes. Next story. My coworker was really delighted when a long-term partner and I broke up. She would comment on my breakup weight loss and how she was excited for me to have horrible dating stories like her. Fast forward over a year, I start dating my dream man, and she gets even colder towards me. To be fair, she was never an easy coworker. Super moody, destructive in the shared workroom, and specifically snotty towards me, the only person sharing the workroom. She started making comments about me and the dream man to everyone else, and it gets back to me, obviously, how I'm dating in her age pool and taking eligible men. She got fired after yelling at me and another coworker, when I guess it was okay for her to yell at me only before that. I'm engaged to my dream man now. Don't worry. Next story. The people that you work with are not your friends unless you hang out outside of work. Maybe not even then. We have a high turnover rate. Decent job. Pays okay. Mentally, very challenging. People who thought they were important are forgotten in a few weeks. Personally, I think it's best to keep work and personal life separate. Next story. I was friendly with a group of people in my office. Suddenly, I was reprimanded for misconduct by HR, and the people complained against me were the same people I hung out with. Now I am the bad person. Next story. I was pretty friendly with two people who worked at my store and knew a lot about them. Talked to them all the time, enjoyed when they were working, considered them friends or at least friend adjacent. One day when I was off, they were both fired for stealing from the company, which was a shock in itself. But then I learned that in their attempt to fight their termination, they were calling other people at the store to get dirt on me to try and get me fired, which in their head would help them somehow. Luckily, I don't really do anything that would get me fired, and all the people they spoke to told me about it, so they didn't tell them anything anyway. Apparently, they didn't think that people would rat them out for doing that, because a few months later, they came to visit the store and waited specifically to talk to me. Next story. Years ago, me and two other guys do the same type job. We had met up and one guy chatting said he had never made such easy money. He bought a caravan at the sea. Next guy says him and wife have been on multiple holidays and bought a big TV. I say, I pay extra to my mortgage and it was finished early. Fast forward a few years and there was a restructure. One person had to go. I was told by the boss the other two gave the reason that I didn't really need the job. I had no mortgage whilst they did. Next story. Coworker would be so nice to your face and offer advice, help, etc., and then find ways to use it against you and have people turn on you. She was also the type to egg you on and push you to the point of blowing up so you would look crazy and get in trouble. It was like working with a real housewife. It's been a long time, and I'm still like, what the heck was her damage? I also learned the hard way to not add coworkers on social media. Next story. She moved to Australia, got her a bottle of wine and chocolates, sent her a message a few months later to see how she was doing. Left me on red. Sent her another message to say I was going to Aussie also for a week. Be good to catch up. Never heard back. That was 2015. Never did that again. Next story. Trained a junior. She was a good friend at the office, and we had commandeer about the bosses. One day I find out she's been promoted ahead of me. Turns out she was sucking up to the boss the whole time and never told me she was going for promotion. I was always told by bosses, not yet. I was far more qualified and a better fee earner than her. She knew if she told me, I would be straight boss to lay out the facts and put in my application, and I would have easily beaten her head to head. But she and my bosses kept a code of silence. She said nothing, and my bosses kept telling me not yet, as they knew she was being going for it and had been sucked up to by her. I left when I found out. It was such a betrayal on both sides. The correct thing to do would have been to promote both of us at the same time if they felt she needed one too. She didn't. I'm not sure why they all felt the need to screw me over as part of it. Instead, very carefully now. Next story. I am starting a new position within the current company. I am going from small department to a way more people. I'll have supervisory position. I am an extrovert or disc category. I am an I. I need to talk to people, and I know colleagues are not friends. I just don't know how to keep quiet. Reading all these comments really shows anything and everything can happen. Next story. I was pretty friendly with my boss. We'd never hang out outside of work, but would hang out talking for hours after work. The company got bought out and they laid off a lot of people. I kept my job. They were going to start dissolving my role and asked me to apply for the role that was closest to what I was doing for the original company. I applied, interviewed, and was told I did super well. Ended up not getting the job and heard through the grapevine that my old boss was telling what would have been my new boss not to give me the job because I'm bad at it. I worked for him for 4 years and he never once complained and would often tell me he wouldn't know what to do without me. But now all of a sudden, I'm bad at my job. Stopped talking to him immediately. Next story. I work in cannabis and I got an opportunity to move out of state to help start up a grow facility and be a manager. My initial team lacked experience and needed a lot of work. But one person on my team, let's call her Alice, was a woman in her late 40s, early 50s, just looking to learn after being a stay-at-home mom for years. She became one of my very best friends I ever had. I taught her everything I knew about cannabis, and she was the funniest, hardest working, competent, curious, and genuinely talented people I ever met. Not only did she excel at work, but we became very close personally, and she even invited me to her house for a few holidays, since I lived further from home, and most weekends I spent with her and her family. Not only did she rise in the ranks in my department, but I was getting a lot of praise for how well the department operated under my leadership. She was a factor, but there were many reasons for the success. I was identified as a young leader in the company, and was even chosen for a special training course for rising stars in the org. After 3 years of building the site from scratch, I was told by my bosses that I was next in line to be the operations manager. About a month later, I get called into the new office after my operations manager gets fired, for a slew of valid reasons. and I'm thinking this is my moment. Instead, they tell me I'm on a PIP, and I wasn't meeting expectations. I was shell-shocked. I never had a disciplinary issue in my life. My team's numbers for 3 years averaged over 100%. I had been sent for a month to another site to get them running as well as mine, and I had just completed a month-long course for future leaders. Despite working on every point in the PIP and sending my GM everything I was doing to fix the issues, they fired me a short while later. None of the reasons made any sense at all. I called Alice sobbing because I couldn't understand the reasons, and I would be devastated that we wouldn't see each other every day anymore. Months later, I was talking to my ex-girlfriend, who worked at the site in another department, told me that my best friend Alice had been a part of my firing. Can you guess who ended up taking over my job? Next story. After massive layoffs, the ones of remaining went to Topgolf to hang out, drink, chat about the company situation, etc. As people started getting tipsy, they just started trash-talking every single person let go, many of which hung out with us all outside company times very often. Cookouts, Topgolf, hiking, etc. I realized it right then and there. It was all networking to move themselves forward wherever they could, and they didn't care about anyone. Cut them all off instantly. Next story. Teaching is rife with this. My first teaching job, I was venting in the teacher's lounge, and lo and behold, someone went to blab to the principal. I never spent a single second of my lunch in there again. Next story. 4 stories. 1. Well, I never considered her a friend, but she seemed like an okay person with some integrity. Until she dumped her files onto my drive. I saw that she got bonus for keeping our salary low. 2. He was considered a friend. Then 4 different clients warned me he is bad-mouthing on me behind my back. I think it is self-evident that I had a good reputation for a reason. I cut him off. When I switched the company and found out he wanted to switch there too, I blocked it. No regrets. He stayed a jerk. 3. 2 idiot intentionally didn't set up anything for the important processes at the client site. They were planning to frame my junior. I organized a meeting, took their processes apart, and then called their seniors. Then they had to explain it to our management, client's management, fix the process, and got fired afterward. 4. I took a guy I knew in when he applied to our company. I remembered him as a solid worker. He started slacking off to such a level it was visible from a satellite. My management is not stupid either. Gave him 3 tasks, 1 in his field, and 2 easy ones you can find all the material for simply Googling. He slacked off, disregarding all the warnings. I fired him. I am lucky in the sense that these 4 are minority to good people I worked with, and where treating somebody friendly and supporting him turned into a great story and success. All the best to you all. Next story. My boss, whom I told I'd be loyal to no matter what, after she had multiple run-ins with her higher-ups, ensured me that the hiring of her former work friend was not going to encroach on me or my role at the company, and that my fear and trepidation around her hiring was unfounded. I apologized and began trying to integrate the hire into my work routines. Boss also asked me to make a list of all my activities so we could appropriately cross-train the department. 2 months later, she fires me and promotes her work friend, citing fit as the ultimate reason for my firing. Ultimately taught me 3 things. 1. Always watch out for yourself at work. No one else is going to do that for you. 2. If all the evidence points towards something, that something is probably going to occur. 3. No one cares what you have going on in your personal life. You're expendable. I was expecting a baby, and it was around Christmas. That didn't stop them. Next story? Boy, I got some good stuff for this one. In 2024, my girlfriend woke up to me having a seizure. Docs think I had a stroke, but I'm perfectly fine both physically and mentally. Well, I wouldn't say perfectly fine. I mean, I'm still me, but apparently no damage was done. They keep looking because it's awfully suspicious that there are 0 issues following. I'm out of work for 6 weeks to recover. 3 months later, my son passed away. I'm out for another 6 weeks. I come back to work, and the entire middle management team I worked with prior is different. Most of these people, I hired and fast-tracked into those cozy management positions. The others, I was always going out of my way to help out. For the previous 9 years of being operations manager, well, being out the first time, division leader makes some moves, thinking I wasn't coming back. No one else that had a stroke ever came back after all. Probably almost certainly walked around talking about I'm not coming back. I've been there for 19 years, so everyone I hired and or scooched into office jobs jumped up a rung in the ladder, just like that. This place is notoriously hard to move up in too. Someone had to pass away for that to happen last time, so they're all treating me like I wasn't quite welcome. One of them makes everything she possibly can as hard as she possibly can. Actually tried to sabotage me by rejecting invoices but not telling me. You get no notification from the system. Also won't tell my why. Stands up at the end of a meeting and says something like, "We're just waiting on you," to make it look like I haven't done my invoices at all. Others schedule me the absolute worst field reps to do my projects, which are naturally all of our very technical, high-profile, intense projects with me having 19 years of experience. So I get the hardest jobs, but the worst techs, if I get any at all. She also flat out refused to even schedule people for my stuff, and I kept having to go out and cover it myself if I cared about the clients. And I did. This is in 110-degree summertime weather, following what we all think is a stroke still. Snippy comments from most of them all the time. And when a couple are nice, it's that fake office nice, not the old, genuine nice it used to be. And let's not forget, all of these people are even there because of me seeing their potential, hiring them, training them well, and vouching for them when office jobs opened up. This only intensifies after I come back from my son passing away. I'm even still trying to be that guy I always was, sharing much better takeoff sheets I made for proposals. Took some technical projects off another guy's plate since I already knew the ins and outs from ops manager involvement. But I do stop going to lunch with them. I can't sit with these people with how they've been doing me after all of this. There are so many more details, but to suffice it, they clearly want me gone, and I am no longer welcome there. These people are such horrible human beings that the do me like this following what we think is a near-death experience for me, and my son passing away in the same 3-month span. Also, I'm trans and came out to one of the people I hired. I had to hold the door open for this girl for like 5 months while she hemmed and hawed about pay and kept floating around to competitors, but I knew she was worth it and would succeed with us if I could just get her in the door. I offered all I could. I don't control the pay scale. She's a lesbian. We were super cool prior. Like the same everything. Same sense of humor, same taste in all kinds of stuff. She outs me to at least some of the office staff. I sent her a picture of me in girl mode from like 2010 or something. Now I'm getting offhand comments about wearing eyeliner out of nowhere. Stuff like that. What the heck is wrong with these people? It's not just that we were friends before all this, but I actually found them in the thousands of applicants, picked them, and shuffled them into these jobs they have now. Next story. I started my first year doing articles, 2 years of post-graduation work before you can become a lawyer, and gave the office tea lady a lift to the bus stop when it was raining. Literally 2 blocks, a 10-minute drive. The next day I got called in and lectured about office romances and keeping a professional distance between support staff and professional staff. Somebody saw her in my car and reported it overnight. Work is work. Private life is private. Next story. Moving to Baltimore and my entire team being outright discriminatory towards clients, and on top of that, harassing me. Told HR, and HR did nothing at all. I've never been very social anyways, but I learned that day to not even bother befriending coworkers, and I haven't since. Next story. I tend to keep to myself and not give much personal information. I had a manager who I told I was going to have surgery. I told her I had tumor that I was going to have removed. I didn't think that was a big deal at all. I needed help figuring out how and when to submit paperwork to HR. She helped me, but she also told many of the other managers and her boss. When I returned, she changed how she treated me. Fortunately, I work for a large company, and she didn't have any power to do anything other than try to make things hard for me. It didn't work, mainly because she was having issues with her boss. Eventually, I got a brand new manager, and she left the department. We weren't friends, but I would think a manager wouldn't gossip about her directs. But I know better now. Then again, maybe she was hoping I wouldn't come back. No idea of her motivations or change in attitude towards me. Next story. I don't know if I'd count her as a friend, but my manager gave me work mom vibes, calling me her son, always being there for me if I needed her, saying she'd fight for me and was protective of me, etc. This facade all came crashing down once anyone above her got involved. If leadership didn't like me for any reason, or I did anything out of line, regardless if I was in the wrong or right, she instantly becomes very cold and professional, and occasionally manipulative. It's a long story that I don't feel like getting into, but I'm not really close with her anymore, especially after I learned how she's treated other employees. Next story. When I worked in it, I reported an inappropriate situation that was affecting my mental health I was personally involved in with someone higher above. The person I trusted to tell just said, "I'm sorry that happened to you," and then went ghost and never checked back in. Definitely a lesson that coworkers aren't always your friends. Next story. Worked briefly with a woman who was very proud of the fact that she was a prime contributor to blacklisting in Hollywood. Basically, she would go around collecting all the gossip on who was a commie and make a list for the feds. During one of our work periods where I had to go into her team's bullpen, we were all talking about previous work experiences, and she went straight to that. Super proud of it, and had no bones about doing it. F you, Peggy. You were the sickest person in the company. Next story. When I was younger, it was really clear that one of the other, on the younger side managers had a crush on me. People would tease me about it because he was super dorky, and so I thought they were my friends and would joke back. This guy was visibly awkward around me. Never a creep, but like others noticed in meetings and such. One day, HR called me in and said they heard I had a major crush on this guy. The woman was trying to act like she was my friend and kept saying, "I know you're young. This type of stuff happens. You can tell me." I repeated, "No, I do not have a crush on him." She started scolding me for being unprofessional and gossiping or something like that. After that, I never talked to the coworkers who would make the jokes because I know they were also spreading rumors about me being in love with the dude. Next story. Was part of a 4-member team. Work ended at 5 on the dot. Out of the blue, they started making excuses why they were staying late. One day I went to the toilet after leaving the office, and when I reached the lobby, 2 of my teammates were waiting for the third. They were not staying late. They just didn't want to leave the same time I did because we all took the same route to the bus. Next story. Worked in the office of a distributor. We usually had 3 people in the office, but we're going through people left and right, so it was mostly just me and the manager for over a year. I had found out I was pregnant, then started miscarrying a few weeks later. I found out on a Friday, and I was distraught as it was my first. I cried to my manager and told her I just wanted to get high so I would be numb. The following Monday, I got randomly chosen for a UA. I was so embarrassed that there was still residual blood and tissue from the miscarriage in the urine cup. It came out clean for illegal substances, of course. I just felt like she was knocking my feet out from under me while I was suffering from a traumatic experience. Such a jerk. Next story. I told a work friend I was going to school to become a nurse. I didn't mention how long it would take me to finish or anything. She told the manager I was leaving to be a nurse. My manager went to the extent of telling me to make sure I give notice before quitting. The crazy thing is, I had just started school, and we were on the subject of college. I guess her motive was to get me out there. So I just stopped talking if it wasn't work-related. Next story. A new young female coworker came to me and said she felt kind of weird about a situation around an older manager. This manager was known for hitting on the much younger employees. I had experienced this myself to a somewhat hard degree, so all I said to her was to be careful. Things had happened in the past with this person, and if she ever felt uncomfortable, to please talk to a specific manager that I trusted. This girl then went to this creepy manager and told them what I said. The manager lobbied the owner to get me fired for my attitude after 5 years of high-performance work there. Sad thing is, there is nothing I would change, but I will always offer support to people who feel taken advantage of. Next story. Nothing wild, but every single one of them talks trash about every other one of them when they aren't around, and are all buddy-buddy with them when they are around. I can only imagine what they say about me. Next story. Not wild, but from the start, the people training me felt I wasn't a part of the clique. So they were training me wrong, telling me I'll be fired for not being faster, etc. My manager is a part of the clique. They would frame me for work I didn't do either and such, and ignore me or talk down. My manager eventually apologized due to some crap that went down when I was in Alaska, but it's creeping back up now. When he gets stressed, I'm the target, and suddenly everything I do is wrong. But it's fine if others do it, and when I call it out, goalposts move, etc. I did make one friend there though. She was a bridesmaid in my wedding, and we hang all the time. Next story. Was let go from a company I'd been with for 9 years out of the blue. In hindsight, it was budget cuts and politics. At the time, it was a sucker punch to the jaw. It was the commentary from women whom I'd shared years hearing about their children, their lives, their problems. At least you can finally get some time to relax. This is just a setback. I don't agree with how it was done, are a few that I still remember. It's really relaxing to have your livelihood stripped away in a matter of minutes, insurance turned off with no heads up, and not given a tangible or real reason, just a minor setback. Next story. I've been at my company for 4 years, and I thought I was friends with a lot of my coworkers. One time I shared an idea that could make all our jobs easier, and they got worried it would replace them and asked me, as their friends, to not show our boss. That stuck with me. I wasn't planning on sharing this with the boss, but it got me thinking that they always hang outside of work and never invite me. They were never my friends. Next story. I worked at a small machinist shop with less than 15 employees like 3 years ago, and it was the most toxic work environment I've ever been in. The gossip was very malicious, and my boss was in on it. I put up with so much crap at that place, unfortunately. I once helped a coworker take apart a CNC machine and cleaned out all the metal chips inside, and this old jerk takes a push broom and pushes my legs with it. I tell my boss about what happened the next day, and how when I help someone out, I expect to be treated with respect. And all I hear in response is dead air. I was also mocked for being a Christian by the parts inspector on several occasions. Almost every long-term employee there was an alcoholic. I was glared at on several occasions for no particular reason, and it was so dreadful on Sunday nights, knowing I had to work another week around those miserable people. I actually developed a drinking problem myself, which didn't help matters. I approached my boss one day about how I felt like an outsider to the company, and that the gossip was really bad, and if he could tell people to keep my name out of their mouths and to grow up. I just got told that gossip happens everywhere, and he refused to take action. I overshared certain parts of my life to the foreman's daughter because of my own depression and loneliness, and that completely backfired on me. I got drunk and told her off one night via text about all the gossip and talking. Big mistake. I was put on a PIP. I was told to work faster with no tangible metrics to track my performance. I was let go a couple months later for low performance. Before I was let go, I was being harassed fairly often and got called peanut brain clocking out one day, while another one of my coworkers had a smug smile on his face just looking at my reaction. Told my so-called friend who was my connection to get this job in the first place about that clocking out harassment story, and they said nothing. We're not friends anymore, obviously. To this day, I still struggle with intrusive thoughts about that place and haven't worked since. I don't think I'll ever really trust people again. I learned some harsh lessons though. Never work for a small company that claims, "We're like a family here," and that likability is more important than job performance. I take responsibility for my mistakes, but I have never been around such mean-spirited people who acted like mean girls from high school. Nepotism and likability matter so much more than skills or performance. I'm never going to try and make friends in the workplace ever again. Next story. I worked at a casino, and I had thought I got along great with everyone. Even the one guy that got me the job, he was saying that everyone seemed to like me. I made it a habit never to gossip or complain to anyone. When I got offered a promotion across the country, no one even acknowledged it. They even held a going-away party for another colleague at the same time. When I moved, one by one, they all deleted me from Facebook. It was like a mass exodus of 100 people removing themselves. It sucked. Next story. I worked with someone who was suspended 4 times. She created problems and tried to set me up as the cause each time. The last attempt was an altered notice from customs about a package that they received. The postmark was the day before I was out of the office. It arrived on the day I was out. The "See you next Tuesday" claimed to a supervisor that I had held on to the notice, hidden in my empty desk drawer, past the date it should have been handled. She said she called and was told there were thousands of dollars in fines. When I got to work, the idiot supervisor was ready, yet again, to fire me for a very easy-to-discover lie from the same cunty person that had done this before. I picked up his evidence. I couldn't care less about his raised voice or arm-waving hysterics, and walked out of his office so I could inspect the papers. Made a couple of sets of copies. The cunty one had erased a date on the notice, but not the postmark. I brought the info right to the site manager and let him know that these 2 idiots were going to cause a lawsuit. So far, their relationship of an idiot and his mediocre manipulator was just good story material for a book, but now it was getting bothersome. If the supervisor was married and taking so much time defending the honor of his crush, then his wife was going to find out unless he wrote out an apology for all the times he had made termination documents. And the other one should be fired because she spent months screwing off and not working. Why are they giving her money to flirt with this guy and cause problems and try to blame me? I walked over to HR and left a brief update and copies, and told HR to call me when they had the written admission and a notice of the cunty being let go. Unbelievable? It was a well-paying job in a Fortune 100 company. It was well worth suffering these idiots for the absolute life-changing money I was getting and career-building experience. I did think that most companies had this type of problems, so it would be the same anywhere else. Found out that HR didn't know about any of the times my job was threatened. That supervisor wrote the letter of admission to me, with apologies. He was demoted, pay decreased. The cunty was suspended, pay loss, and told if anything further happened, she would be let go because of her egregious actions. No UI, no reference, demotion to receptionist. The friends part was, each time cunty found a random person to shower with attention, befriend, and have them help her because she wanted me fired for not being her friend and not letting her order me around like her previous coworker, who quit from the abuse. She got a couple of people fired/demoted for their part in lying. People that a company hires are not vetted, not proven, not bonded, nor insured to be your friend. They are strangers that will get you cut loose at any cost to save their job. Each of the people that she involved that got fired or demoted saw her do this same thing to a person before them. I've never experienced anyone since that who was so completely a failure at just doing a basic job and leaving others alone. Well, except the one at a corporate department for a paint company. Next story. I was a concrete project manager. I found a lot of additional work concealed in a contract that would mean we had to do it without compensation for a GC. One of our VPS helped negotiate pricing for a wall subcontractor we were using. It was an astronomical number way out of the ordinary, but I was new to the company and thought it could be their going rate. I alerted the team about the discrepancies. Everyone was praising me for finding the overlooked work and saving the company almost $3.5 million. It turned into a 4-month bloodbath with the GC during contract negotiations. We were about to walk away from the job, but the C-suite team decided to abruptly sign the contract to everyone's shock. Come to find out, the VP was getting kickbacks from the wall subcontractor and helped push the contract through to guarantee his personal gains over the company's best interest. He lied about things I had done to try to get me fired. Several employees overheard him bragging about putting me in my place. I was devastated. The dude was an icon in the industry in our region and was always so cool to my face. I ended up having someone follow me home and loosen my lug nuts. Then brake lines went out. I lost all my farm equipment over 10 days to blown motors. Single worst experience of my life. $600K of vehicles and equipment gone. The vice president found his excuse to have me terminated, as I was now a liability. I never knew who did it. Coworker, the contractor, or a case of mistaken identity. It caused a massive downward spiral in my life. It's just business. I would have protected one of my guys and handled things differently, but they are a national company. I was bad for business and left to rebuild my life on my own. Next story. Worked in a small group of 4 for an investment firm that reported into one manager. For whatever reason, manager and I really hit it off. He would invite me to drinks and invited me and my girlfriend over to his house for dinner with him and his wife. I really thought I had the best job. He'd randomly set up meetings with me and we would just shoot the crap in his office. I was always worried about how this looked, so made sure I got my work done. Then the vibe changed, and I heard rumors that layoffs may be coming. He started to undercut all of us and basically put us on the spot in meetings or set a deadline he knew we couldn't meet. I had a feeling he was trying to get one of us to quit. He would come in the office and close his door, and only open it when he left for the day. It was bizarre. He started accusing me of undermining him and was damn near tears one time. I couldn't take it anymore, so ended up finding another gig and gave my notice. The second that happened, he turned nice again. They even took me out for a send-off dinner at a really nice restaurant. All of it was so bizarre. I kept in touch with one of the team members afterwards, and he ended up getting fired maybe a year later. Basically, senior management never knew what he actually did. This was like 25 years ago, and what's funny is, my firm actually hired them as a vendor, and it came up that I used to work there. I just said something to the effect of, "Funny story, I'll tell you why I left," and never got around to it. I never burned the bridge, even though I probably could have sued them or gotten severance. Next story. I worked at a company for 8 years. Had about 5 to 6 people I considered really close friends. We hung out outside of work, had other similar interests. I even vacationed in Vegas with a few and went to one's wedding. After I quit to move for better opportunities for myself, Guess how many of these so-called friends kept in touch? I tried to keep up with them, but after many attempts with zero reciprocation, I gave up. People you work with are colleagues at best. Next story. Half the team got laid off, including myself, so another team could pick up the work. One of the remaining teammates got promoted to my cut coworkers role, and they hired someone to do my job at better pay. Next story. I worked on a couple of projects with someone, we'll call her T, in an office about 1,000 miles away. Whenever she was in town, my wife and I would have her over for dinner. Wonderful lady. We even had her stay over an extra day once so that we could take her to a local festival. About 6 months later, my new manager says, "We need to improve our relationship with that office." I talked to the VP there, and he said that T is the best contact for our group. I need you to develop a working relationship with her. I said, "Dude, I've had her over for dinner a bunch of times, and even had her spend the night at my place. What more do you want?" What is the craziest thing you witnessed at work story you heard about? Next story. A girl I used to work with, who had a boyfriend, banged a guy, who had a fiancé, in the office. Top floor of a huge shared office block in central London. After work drinks at the pub, got locked out of our floor going to the loos without her pass. Had to go down to building reception on the ground floor because this guy couldn't hear her knocking on the office doors. It's maybe 2 a.m. at this point, and she's there in her underwear at the reception desk, who won't give her a temp pass to go back up. So reception phoned the CEO at home to verify she's an employee. Next day, they play the CCTV to her and him in separate meetings, and they're both fired. Next story. My pal used to work in another coop in a dodgier bit of town. One evening, when he goes to restock the milk, he finds a butt plug just sat front and center on one of the shelves. Got some gloves to get rid of it and cleaning sprays, while the manager checks CCTV to identify the owner. Turns out it was a bloke in his 40s. Bit scruffy, but not a jakey. He just walked up to the chiller, reached round back, and pulled this thing out of himself and plonked it with the semi-skimmed. My mate didn't last much longer in there after that, especially as he had to serve the bloke a few days later and asked him, "Did you forget something last time you were in?" and got a bollocking for it. Next story. Worked in a DIY shop at uni. A guy deliberately damaged his hand with an axe so he could leave early to watch an England friendly. Not even an important match. First and last time I grassed someone up to the manager. I did not want to work with a psycho like that. He'd only started that week. Could have just said he had a pre-planned thing when he started. Next story. It was the late 90s, and a year before I joined the company, there was a Black Eye Friday tradition of closing the office early and everyone in the industry descending into town for day drinking. After a full day of drinking, 2 guys from another firm decided to go for a swim in the River Tyne, thinking it would be a fun thing to do. Unfortunately, only one came back out. Next story. In the petrol station I worked at, a customer put in a complaint for getting wet when entering the car wash with her windows down. Another put a claim in for a new haircut/style when she filled up and it was windy. Next story. 25-year award. Company put on coaches and a massive do. Every single year at a swanky hotel up in London. Long story short, an idiot mixed beer and wine. On the drive back on the motorway, he goes running up the bus to stop the driver and get him to pull over. Gets out, runs to the back of the coach, trousers down, and lets rip to what can be described as violent diarrhea. The coach coming from behind sees a coach pulled over, so pulls over, thinking there's a problem. As the coach pulls up, the idiot has his trousers down and is relieving himself out in full view of directors, upper management, and various other staff. The idiot panics, runs back on the bus with diarrhea all over his trousers, shirt, and shoes squelching. Women on the bus were then gagging and being sick because of the smell. The idiot sits down, and the coach driver, out of embarrassment, continues to the drop-off location. Company ended up with a massive cleaning fee. What makes it better is, the idiot didn't notice the coach had a toilet at the rear. Now, any normal person would have called in sick and made an excuse. It was the food, wasn't feeling well, etc. Nope. The idiot goes to work the next day bragging about it. Gets called in the office and was basically threatened with dismissal before a union rep intervened and stated the company paid for, thus provided the means for this to happen. 25-year awards never happened again. Source? My parents were on the coach, sat at the front, and my dad still retches when he tells the story. Addition. The story is still being shared and told 20 years later by new staff. Next story. A lady asked if she could try an outfit on. We said yes, but our fitting room was currently in use. But as soon as it was free, she was welcome to use it. Instead of waiting, she just stripped completely in the middle of the store to try it on. We also have a very strong no couples in the fitting room policy. Next story. 20 years ago now, but we had a store man who, upon reflection, definitely had some kind of learning difficulties/needs. Anyway, he made an error ordering 6-inch screws instead of 5-inch, and to attempt to stop anyone noticing, he filed them down, all 500 of them. It quickly became apparent because the ends were completely flat when we went to use them. He also once painted the workshop floor starting at the door and working towards the corner in the far end. And another time, we had these floor specialists come in to install that hospital-style flooring with no corners/the flooring rises up the wall slightly. He left something in his storeroom and proceeded to walk across the screed all the way to his storeroom and back out again. Hilarious looking back. Next story, something I didn't see but was told about by the manager. I used to volunteer at a charity shop whilst in school. The manager said about a man coming in and taking women's clothes into the changing room. Not a big deal for a man to be trying on women's clothes, right? Except he wasn't trying them on. They found out after he left the clothes in the changing room that he'd been pleasuring himself looking at the clothes. The way they found out was, evidence on the clothes. Next story. On a work trip together with another company years ago, a guy from our company drunkenly went to bed with secretary from other company. He shat the bed. Our boss made him apologies to her the next day. Next story. Had my intended boss quit on an international flight as we flew out to work on a project. He decided 1 hour into our 10-hour flight that he'd made a mistake and couldn't be away from his wife. Made for an awkward flight and even more awkward reception as we were met at the airport. He was on the next flight home at his own expense. This was my first graduate job. Next story. I joined a software development team and was told of the recent time the programmed manager and the head of software started grappling in a meeting. Next thing was that one or both of them fell out of a second-story window. The aggressor got sacked. It was the 1990s. Next story. Had a totally useless colleague, female, who I was fond of, and a truly evil boss, also female, in a very run-of-the-mill admin team. Eventually, I had to grass on my lovely colleague, as she was spending 90% of her time on Facebook, which affected our output negatively, despite me talking to her about it. Told my boss, who marched into a colleague's office and started screaming at her for being useless. My scared colleague then tried to escape the building, which meant going through my office. My boss caught up with her right in front of my desk and started hitting her. I stood up and said she needed to stop beating on my colleague, at which point my boss shouted, "You were the one that wanted her punished," or words to that effect. My boss was eventually forced to retire after that, but she never suffered any real consequences of her actions. Next story. I was working in sales in my previous life. One day our MD came out with me to meet some clients, and afterwards we went for something to eat with another colleague of mine. My colleague decided he knew a good place to eat, and we all jumped in his company car. After 20 minutes or so, out of nowhere, he was like, "Hey, check this out," and proceeded to pull his key out the ignition, and the engine stayed on. He didn't take into account that his steering lock would engage and sent us all straight through a red light and obliterated a dry stone wall the other side of said red lights. My guy was flogged before HR and dismissed soon after. Next story. Working at a pharmacy, we saw a guy coming with a freezer bag, those you get to keep frozen food chilled. Didn't think much of it, as we were next door to an Iceland. Not much later on, a customer asked if we were going to get more of product X. A colleague, who filled all the shelves on that day, goes to check, and all our stock of fancy French skincare was gone. Later we saw on CCTV that the guy with the Iceland bag just filled the bag and walked away, as the foil inside prevent to trigger the door alarm. Next story. Also worked in a DIY shop, and there was a lady in a tight top and miniskirt walking around with a guy holding a camera. One of the blokes I worked with was following them around, getting all the workers' attention, saying, "Look at her," etc. Then the bloke with the camera asked him to get a few of us to stand round the bed so he could film her pleasuring herself. This was a funny day I will never forget. Next story. Mate had an office which had its car park accessed via a laneway for a couple of weeks. The staff spent their lunchtime looking out the window into the laneway. There was a small car, Micra, which arrived each day and used as a mobile knocking shop. I need to get out more, I know. Next story. Someone had an overdose at our Christmas party. We didn't know he was an addict, but everyone was getting drunk, and I guess he just thought, why not, and do it in the disabled loo. Awful. He passed a few weeks later following a separate overdose. Next story. This blew my mind. but you probably had to be working there to really feel the stupidity. Alan worked on the shop floor, relatively well thought off, as seemed to get a lot of work done and have time to be chatting to people. Actually, Alan had to be told to slow down when orders dropped off. We didn't want a load of stuff hanging around, as orders changed regularly, and we would be left with a load of stuff no one would want, wasting space and parts that would be needed for other work. The mood changed, and Alan was getting into trouble more, and he was clearly pissed off. I was asked to be there for a meeting before action. He had been told repeatedly to change, and he wouldn't. They kept finding him making extra parts. He refused to stop. He wouldn't. He argued that's how he worked. He couldn't do the job without all of his spares. But we don't keep spares. Turned out that he had hundreds of pre-built spare parts hidden away, all different variants. Most didn't have any order, and many had to be thrown away. Thousands of pounds in the bin, so he could spend more time chatting. Next story, worked in a day center for adults with learning disabilities. New guy, well, new to the center, he'd been moved there from home care, who was pretty good, freaked out one day when his bag went missing. Everyone was telling him to chill as it would turn up, but he was an absolute wreck. Eventually, it turns up in the cupboard, where everyone expected it to be. A few weeks later, police and management turn up and go with him, and his bag, upstairs to the office. We never see him again. Turns out he was going into the toilets to smoke heroin. Another staff member recognized the smell and reported it. I think management already had suspicions too, and moved him to the day center to catch him. Next story. My old customers later featured in a documentary about brothels in the area. They were a pimp and madam, and really awful people, but I saw them and chatted to them on a near-daily basis for a few years. Next story. I worked at this factory years ago. Only about 10 workers there, small company. The boss's nephew worked there and was good mates with the foreman for some time. They would go out together for meals with their partners, etc. Turned out that the foreman was having an affair with the boss's nephew's wife, and had been going on for best part of a year. Everyone found out. You could cut the tension with a knife. The boss sided with the foreman and seemed to dislike his nephew for some reason. We had a small Christmas do at the pub not long after, and it was probably one of the most awkward situations I've ever been in. No one was saying a word or even attempting to. I downed all the free drinks and left within an hour. It all exploded about a month after, and the nephew stormed out screaming, shouting. Couldn't really hear over the machinery. Never saw him again after that. I felt so sorry for him. He wasn't a bad bloke. The foreman came across as a decent bloke as well, but I always had a gut feeling he couldn't be trusted, and something was off about him, all justified when the news broke out. Next story. Some stories from when I used to work for a very large law firm. 1. One of the partners would run up hundreds of pounds each month on chat lines from his company mobile. 2. Somebody left their dirty mags in the gents' toilets. 3. Sex in the office was a very common occurrence, so much so that the senior partner in the branch I worked at sent out an email saying, "There is a Premier Inn next door. Use it rather than your desks." Next story. So we had a theft at work, but in a weird way. A customer left the shop, put down their bag of stuff, and someone nicked it. This happened just before I started work. Then the thief came into the shop and was like, "Hey, I want to do a return on behalf of my wife." And all my manager could do was let him go with the standard, "Sorry, we need the card holder here to sign it off," and then alerted security. But yeah, the guy got away. Also, at a previous retail job when I worked for Smith's Toys, I was working there when the mini SNES was released. There was with pre-orders, and too many were allowed and a bunch got canceled. This was my third shift there, and I think about an hour before it ended, guy comes in to get his pre-order, and turns out he's one of the canceled one. He doesn't take this well. I then spend however long standing behind the till, terrified of this big guy. Very stereotypical bald-headed middle-aged geezer type, arguing with the member of management who I'd called over, as he's blustering about this, and the shop security guard is lurking around. Eventually, he's convinced to leave, demanding we will call him when we get more in. Then, apparently, he came back after I left. As turned out, he had one of the valid pre-orders anyway, so I guess he was just pissed he couldn't get two. Next story. Once a pigeon flew straight into my office window and passed. Me and a couple colleagues went outside to see what the loud bang was and found the pigeon. A woman who worked there came outside to see what we were looking at, became quite distressed at seeing said pigeon, and ran off back into the office. Someone went after her to check she was okay, but she came running back out with the defib machine. What's the oddest thing you know about someone you work with? Next story. We had an argument for years over whether one of the bosses had a fake leg or not. All 'cause he walked a bit wonky. He was not a small man to say the least, so most just thought it was that. Turns out he had no legs. Next story. I work with an eccentric guy. He's a nice chap, but does he have some strange ways? He's deeply infatuated with cats, to the point where, no matter what we're talking about, he can always swing the conversation to include his cats. In the past, he's mentioned a cat-related book called A Cat Called Birmingham, IIRC, something like that anyway. Once, out of general curiosity, I found that book on Amazon and started reading the reviews. I found a review that was definitely from him. His username gave him away. It included his hobby and the town he's from. Again, out of curiosity, I checked his other reviews and discovered that he had quite the interest in, shall we say, risque novels. Next story. Worked at a manufacturing place with an old guy who had been there all his life. We clear an area for new machinery to come in and find a blow-up doll behind the steel rack next to his bench. When asked about it, he just smiles and refuses to say anything. Next story. Similar situation to you. I was working at an event, doing the meet and greet thing, when across a crowded room, I locked eyes with one of the 3 directors of the business I worked for. So, I went to say hello. Next story. I work with a woman who only dates married men and makes a point of letting everyone know. I think she is on her 3rd married guy in 2 years. She actually parades it like it's cool. She's hot, but got that Black Widow vibe about her. Nutcase. Next story. I'm British and live in the USA, and occasionally get do the have you met? Insert name of royal family member. One time a coworker, also from Britishin, interjected that she had, and on a number of occasions. I was a little stunned, more so when she mentioned that she was actually a lady and had met them at family gatherings. Big ones as not closely related. I was skeptical, but she was the real thing. Met a Yank at uni, married and moved with him to the States. Next story. I used to work with a guy who'd moved to Australia after his wife died. Had the hotel fall in the sea. Then, when he had to move back, got captured by pirates. We all assumed he was full of crap, until he showed us articles about some of it. Apparently, the universe hated the guy. Next story. It's not so much about him, but about how we just never knew each other, so to speak. When he joined, we clearly had the same hobbies, and we added on FB, and we had like 20 non-work people and mutual friends. Just can't figure out how we never met before. But that's not all. At that time, he had just become a father. Cool. But then I saw a pic of his partner. I've known her for years. I knew she was pregnant. I figured she'd had the baby recently. They've been together years. And yet we had never, ever met or even heard each other's names. Just felt so odd. We live in a pretty small town, and our shared hobbies are pretty nerdy, and everyone knows everyone. And I know the partner from an even smaller lifestyle. Next story. A new boss started at my work, and we all ended up adding each other on Facebook on a work nights out. And I wasn't expecting her PFP to be her and her husband in a collar and dog chain. The more PFPs I looked through, the more horrified I was. Next story. Worked with a guy in a supermarket. Used to wear a lot of jewelry. Someone asked him about it, and he says he a collector, and if anyone was interested, he could bring in some bits he wanted to sell. So, next day he comes in with a briefcase full of chains, rings, watches, and not Argos specials. We are talking top-of-the-line stuff, like some watches that were 5 to 10K each. Turns out, he was some super rich millionaire ex-stockbroker who had tried to retire, but was just bored, so got a shelf-stacking job in a supermarket just to be able to hang around with normal people. Next story. There is this massively awful woman at my work who is the office manager's assistant. She will be your best mate and overshare 1 minute, and then hate you over almost nothing the next. She's currently ignoring me, and I mean truly ignoring me, and has unfriended me in Facebook. After asking me in person if it was okay to friend me on Facebook, because I forgot to put in an office request, but arrived at the office and filled out the office request in the lobby before I even got in. Anyways, it's not really something I know, but when she deemed me acceptable to talk to, she showed me her glamour photos. Just completely out of the blue. Just called me over as I was walking past and said, "Hey Jen, look at this," and turned her phone towards me. She's 60 plus, quite overweight, quite, unfirm, and the glamour shots were in panties and bra. I'll never unsee these images. Next story. Worked with a guy nicknamed Angry Para. He was an ex-paratrooper with anger management issues. Bald head, well-built, bad attitude, etc. He'd previously been in bother for threatening other staff in work and causing bother. Walked up behind him one day when he was on his computer. He was looking at makeup. Curious, I asked him why. He had a side hustle selling girls' makeup on eBay. Next story. The woman on nights, when she finishes work in the morning, she heads straight to the farm to tend to her horses. She's still wearing her scrubs during all this. She then goes home and sleeps in her work clothes, then returns to work the following night in the same clothes, and once had twigs in her hair and horse crap on her shoes at work. Next story. My wife is a sports therapist and rents a room in a combat gym. She sponsors the fight team, so kind of considers the head coach/owner her boss. He fully believes that humans are from outer space and were put here by aliens. Prometheus is essentially a documentary to this guy. I've met him several times, and he is the most standard bloke ever. He's got kids, 2 dogs, is obviously stable enough to run a successful business, but is totally convinced humans aren't native to Earth. It baffles me. Next story. I found out the guy who heads up the team I work in is also an introvert, and told me one evening when he was younger, he went out in fancy dress in stockings and high heels, and said he felt more at home like that than if he were out in normal clothes.